And joining me today are Chris Caulfield and Bonnie Duet from Crown Agents Bank. Rather than me intro, how about you introduce yourselves? Chris, would you like to go first?
Of course, yeah. Thank you for having us here today. I'm Chris Caulfield. I'm one of the relationship managers at Crown Agents Bank, and I sit within the banks and non-bank financial institutions team.
Awesome. Bonnie?
Hi, yeah, again, thank you for having us here today. I'm Bonnie Duet. I head up the pensions product team at Crown Agents Bank and am responsible for the digital transformation of the product. So I've been with the bank for 6 years, and around 4.5 years ago we started on our digital journey that we'll be talking more about today.
Love that. Okay, yes, we are going to dig into that. So tell us just for a little bit for sort of clarity first. Tell us about Crown Agents Bank. So it's an organisation that I think most people would have heard of. But tell us the elevator pitch, if you like, around what the bank does, some of the key customers, and particularly sort of your role within it. I think, Chris, would you want to take that one?
Yeah, of course, no problem at all. So we are a UK-based bank. We've been around for over 190 years, so we're fully regulated by the FCA and the PRA. We've just opened our European office as well, so we are expanding geographically. But if you look broadly at the nature of the customers that we serve, essentially that customer base is comprised of a combination of central banks, commercial banks, international development organisations, NGOs, a range of sort of MBFIs or fintechs. So we work with remittance companies, foreign exchange brokers, money service bureaus, etc. But I guess more pertinently to this conversation today, we've got long-standing relationships with international government pension schemes, and we're working with increasingly more UK-based local government pension schemes and third-party administrators or private sector in-house schemes. As an aside from that, I'm delighted to say that we're also a B Corp certified bank. So yeah, very sort of ESG focused as well.
Awesome, I love that. So let's focus in on what we're talking about today, which is the pension angle to your business, which of course is a big part of that. What are you sort of seeing in the market at the moment when it comes to the pension industry, particularly around that sort of, I think you've got a very unique use case when it comes to Veriff, particularly around the demographic that you're talking to and the use case requirements particularly involved in that?
Yeah, so if you look at the sort of status quo, so the solutions that we provide to our pension clients, so that the legacy pension clients that we work with for many years and some of the newer customers, is essentially pension payroll services, so particularly international pension payroll. And as an ancillary service to that, we provide proof of life solutions. So if you look at how things have operated historically, what that has entailed from a proof of life perspective, what that's entailed is essentially pension funds sending out manual forms. So they would send out life certificates to their pensioners that are living overseas. They would ask those pensioners to complete the forms, so sign the forms, gain third-party attestation from a notary of sorts, and then post the forms back to the either Crown Agents Bank or the fund directly. Obviously, that worked to an extent for many years, but there's obviously a range of technology available now that can better serve those pension funds and give them a higher level of assurance that they are indeed, the level of verification is the sort of the best available. And also from a pensioner perspective, if you think about the sort of manually intensive process of them having to fill out the form, gain the attestation, leaving their house to do that, and then obviously worrying about the postage, it's a bit of a pain. It's a bit of a burden for them. So we have embraced, over the last few years, more modern technology to better serve, as I say, the pension funds, to, as I say, give them that higher level of assurance, but also to provide the pensioner with a more efficient way to verify themselves as part of that proof of life service.
I love that, and it's a really interesting use case from our point of view. Veriff works with a number of different organisations across industries. One of the ones, the more trendy stuff we hear about with sort of video gaming, where we're trying to verify the ages of younger people who are a lot more digitally savvy, who have grown up with this world. That's obviously not the case with this demographic. I think pensioners, we would argue are, just haven't grown up with it. It's new to them. So, what are some of the challenges that you found, particularly when dealing with this demographic?
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. I think it's fair to say that older generations maybe aren't quite as familiar with using modern technology, and I don't mean that in a patronising way. It's just the way it is. Younger generations have grown up surrounded by smartphones and the internet and all sorts of apps and technology. So, yeah, with that in mind, first and foremost we saw a bit of a change. So if you look at the pandemic, if you look at COVID, I think everyone had to become more familiar with using technology. We were all sort of locked away, housebound, in the midst of all the lockdowns, and to keep up with friends and family, to communicate with people and see your loved ones. Most of us were connecting via digital services, be it calls or whatever it may be. So I think everyone, regardless of the age demographic, had to become more comfortable with using technology generally. And I think off the back of the pandemic, we have seen a bit more of a shift to all generations using technology. So I think we launched our digital proof of life solutions at a good time. We launched in 2021, sort of coming out the back of COVID, as it happens. So first and foremost, that's helped in that, as I say, people are more comfortable using technology. But in addition to that, we've tried to make it as intuitive as possible every step of the way. So that's everything from the initial communication that we send out to the pensioners or the members, asking them to complete the process. We provide a user guide as part of the correspondence that we send out. We created an explainer video that sits within our secure online platform that the pensioner can watch before they go through the process. But also having the exclusive partnership with Veriff, some of your technology, so things like assisted image capture, for example, which guides the pensioner through the actual image capturing process, has really helped. So yeah, we've been we've seen a positive uptake in terms of members, pensioners actually demanding this kind of technology, but also the shift from a pension fund perspective in being more comfortable embracing this kind of solution suite.
Yeah, that's really good to hear, and I think that sort of user experience stuff is really sort of top of mind for somebody coming into this process. It's already a potentially difficult situation to find themselves in if you don't filling out forms, and it's a very official kind of process, if you like. Yeah. So you want to have that. You want to make it as easy as possible, essentially, and kind of. So let's get into that then. About and Bonnie, feel free to sort of jump in here about how you went about building that flow that had that sort of UX as sort of top of mind in this process.
Yeah, so for a start, we made a conscious decision not to go down the app route for this journey. So it's fully URL based, and our hypothesis was that the commitment of downloading an app and the technical acumen that you need to be able to do that in this demographic, we decided against it. So we wanted to make it as unconstrained as possible. So that's a start. As Chris mentioned, we have things like the user guides and a really clean onboarding process for the member. I think what has been a game changer is that we have adapted the Veriff user experience. So what we saw in a previous proof of concept that we did was that many members were using the help of family members and maybe a carer. And within the previous proof of concept, we were getting a lot of declines as a result of that. So we worked with Veriff to change the technology. And that was part of the customization that we have seen and introduced, and that's what we think has made it frictionless. And we're kind of embracing technology but using it with a human touch. We never wanted it to just be tech first. We always wanted a human to be involved, and that's why we love Veriff, because there is a human at the end of the process. And part of the GDPR regulations state that you can't make a decision on a payment without having some kind of human intervention at some parts of the process. And that's another driver for our partnership with Veriff. So, yeah.
That's lovely to hear. I really like that. And I think that sort of configurability, sort of personalization, I think is a real. It's culturally something that we're really big on at Veriff, actually, and sort of working with a customer or a partner in this instance to sort of really understand what the problem is, and then come up with a solution that is not something that's off the shelf, but it's actually tailored completely to the use case that you find yourself in. So tell us a little bit more about, so go back in time a little bit and tell us a little bit more about that, those early explorations that you were doing. When you first sort of identified that there was a problem, this is not something that we can solve ourselves. How do we go out to sort of the market and find a solution here? So just talk us through that process a little bit and some of those sort of early maybe missteps that you would have made along the way until eventually get you to the situation you are now.
Well, they always say fail fast, don't they? And I'm not saying that we failed. However, the data that we were seeing was not great from a user experience on the member side. We were seeing a high abandonment rate, members having to complete the process many times. So let me just step back. So we trialled 2 providers, so Veriff being one, and we trialled 2 providers within a proof of concept. So what we were seeing was, as I said, big abandonment rates, not a great user journey, lots and lots of calls coming into our call centre where members were really struggling with the process. And we did an A/B and we looked at the Veriff results, and without question, I think I'm down to nearly 0 abandonment rate now. And as soon as we launched with Veriff, the markers were just great. Like the data that we were seeing, it reduced. So we no longer have a huge abandonment rate within the process. Just the customer service that we received from Veriff as well, and just doing those tweaks along the way where we were seeing a lot of fails because two individuals were in the frame. It was just having that really quick resolution from Veriff and working in partnership with us that allowed us to step forward. So we did an RFP. We selected 2 providers, and then we did proof of concepts, and then we selected Veriff as our partner. And we definitely are moving in a great direction with Veriff. So it was a good decision.
That's great to hear. Thank you. Let's just talk about the just to stay on this for a moment around the implementation side of things, because that's obviously a big, potentially a big stumbling block for a new customer. If you're taking on any piece of new software, it's that sort of integrating it into your systems, which is potentially a hurdle. So could you just talk me through that process, sort of how it went, and some of the how you sort of navigated some of the issues that came up?
So. Initially, we integrated with Veriff like for like, so we were doing case by case, and we worked with our client services manager at Veriff, the technical team, who we set up various Slack channels with. So we were consistently and constantly talking to yourselves, to Veriff. And we just integrated so quickly. So I think it took 2 weeks from start to finish to actually do the technical integration. And that was including the exceptions management. And then Veriff partnered with us to launch. And then with reporting along the way. So when we were going through the proof of concept, Veriff were updating us probably weekly in terms of how we were doing from a data perspective, and always on hand to support. Subsequently, we've changed the way that we transact with Veriff, and we've introduced webhooks, which has had a great it's had a great impact in the reporting, and also the accuracy of what we're seeing for each member, because it allows us to kind of hold on to that member in one journey rather than creating a case by case for each submission that they have. So that's been, we never stand still. We always want to improve the process, and that's why in the last few months we've introduced webhooks, and again that's improved what we're doing as a partnership with Veriff.
Awesome, great to hear. And I think that's going to be my next question actually around that. How did you get things from that initial sort of proof of concept testing stage to scaling to where you are now, and sort of what were the timeframes involved in that, I suppose, is the first question, but also what were some of the steps involved that you had to go through there, webhooks possibly being one of them as well, to look at again?
So we launched with Veriff 2 years ago, and we did quite a long proof of concept supported by Veriff. They trusted us as partners, and that's what we loved as an organisation. So I think our proof of concept probably lasted between 6 and 8 months. We then felt confident enough, because obviously we are dealing with a vulnerable demographic, and we are serving our clients. So we've actually got 2 customers in the flow. We've got our clients and we've got the beneficiary, the member at the other side. So we're having to satisfy that you're covering off the fraud aspect and all of the technical documentation that our clients need, and the member journey. So we got to a certain point in the process where we were getting voice of customer feedback, and we then worked with Veriff to get the full contract in place. We had success drivers. So initially, my success metric was 20% digital uptake. It surpassed massively what we initially thought. So 20% success metric, it went up to 80 to 90% uptake rate, which is phenomenal. And so we had to enter into a partnership with Veriff because the product data spoke for itself.
I love that. It's great to hear. So, and let's talk about that. You sort of start to allude to the impact there, and you mentioned the abandonment rate metric earlier on as well. Let's talk about, bring it up to the present day then. So what is the impact that you've seen in that 2 years? Do you have any other metrics you could point to, or customer feedback or anything like that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, the uptake rate has been really, really positive. But before I go into the detail, it's important to say we, as a bank, we offer numerous options to our pension funds and the pensioners to complete their proof of life check successfully. So whilst we're digitally led, we lead with the biometric facial authentication solution via Veriff. In addition to that, we offer the pensioners the ability to complete we still offer the traditional life certificate forms, so we can send them out if for whatever reason the pensioner is sort of digitally excluded, or there's a mitigating circumstance that means they can't complete the process digitally. We can send out a life certificate form for them to complete and gain the attestation, and either they can post that back to us or they can upload it securely into our online portal. So given the fact that we provide a range of options, we've still actually seen from a pensioner perspective a really high uptake rate using the digital technology. So that's really encouraging. If you look at some of the newer local government pension schemes that we work with, the percentage of pensioners that have opted for the biometrics is upwards of 80%. So most of the time what we see is sort of 80 to 90% plus uptake, and that's the pensioners opting to use this kind of technology. So I think that just sort of adds weight to what we were saying beforehand about all generations, all demographics being more familiar and comfortable using this kind of technology. The stats back that up. And what we're also seeing is that, as I say, we launched this tech in 2021. So we've seen on numerous occasions all of the funds that maybe went live for the first time in 2021 or 2022 are in their second, third or fourth project, or at least being planned. So yeah, we're seeing that sort of repeat business. We're seeing the appetite sort of continue in the same vein. And what we also find is subsequent projects, it's even, the pensioners are familiar using the tech, and it's even more seamless for those pensioners to go through the process. So it's really encouraging.
That's really interesting, and I think that actually validates some. We've just done some research, actually, the Veriff Fraud Index, which is our survey of end users across the US and Europe. one of the questions we ask in there is gauging the comfort level of biometrics. And you obviously, people are familiar with passwords and those sort of knowledge-based questions, but biometrics you would expect to be much lower than it actually is. It comes in really high. It's I think 64% of people would rather use that for ease of use and for the greater security. So it's great to hear that in sort of a real life example, as you've just pointed out, that's the case too.
Yeah, indeed. And just to add to that, I think whilst the technology is really intuitive and it's fairly straightforward to use, and as I say, we support the member at every step of the way to complete the process successfully. So, as I say, we've provided user guides. We clearly explain what what the pensioner needs to do in the correspondence that we send them. In addition to that, I think where we're unique as an organisation is that we have a dedicated customer service team, our pension services team, who are on hand. They're there to provide specific pensioner or pension fund customer service. So if pensioners are having any difficulty logging into the platform or going through the biometric process, we have a team that will support them through that and guide them through it.
That's awesome. And Bonnie, so back to you. Is there any sort of any metrics you'd like to sort of point out that sort of demonstrate the impact sort of over the longer term that that you've been working with us?
Yeah. So just looking at the stats today, although we have still it's actually 14% resubmission rate. What I really like about the Veriff technology is that it keeps the member or the end user within the journey. So it doesn't allow the individual to get right to the end of the process and say, sorry, it hasn't worked. It actually guides them using the assisted image capture along the way. So it holds their hand, and that's what we need for the technology. It's just perfect for the demographic, because there are some technology out there that pride themselves on being the fastest, and Veriff is still quick. We've got a 6% turnaround time with Veriff, by the way, but it's just too quick for our demographics. So to add a bit of latency into the process, which is what we did right at the start, really has paid dividends to the member experience, really. So we have that resubmissions, but I'm never too concerned about resubmissions because it's not abandonment. Veriff hasn't allowed the member to be moved from the process. They've kept them and guided them along the way. So we're down to a really acceptable, amazing abandonment rate of about 0.3%, which is absolutely amazing. We have thousands of members. So I worked for the company when we had our first member go through it. He was 101, and it was just a big moment for us because we'd had this idea a couple of years before. Why don't we use biometrics to do this process? It's crazy that we're sending out 8,000 pieces of paper. And to have that first member from India, 101 years old, embracing the technology, we just thought, yeah, we have made the right decision. Yeah. And to date, our oldest member is 103. So our most popular demographic of members completing the process is between 70 and 79 years old. So that's, it's amazing for them. And I think, as Chris mentioned before, members are so much more digitally engaged after the pandemic. And we did not launch this as a result of the pandemic. We'd already started doing this 1.5 years, 2 years before the pandemic hit. It was just the timing. And I think that technology has accelerated 5 years, as maybe 10, as a result of the pandemic. I think older people maybe wouldn't have ever really needed to or wanted to embrace technology, but they've had to. And now it opens up a completely different world for them. And what I love about the process is that we're giving members independence. you know, something that they may have had to kind of been really vulnerable, gone out of the house, paid for attestation, paid for postage. Sometimes there's disabilities there. So, you know, the human side of what we're doing, that's what I love.
Yeah.
So the stats are great. We're at 97% conversion rate.
Awesome.
80 to 90% uptake, very little abandonment rate, massive amounts of traffic coming through. That's great. But actually what we're doing, it actually means something. And that's what, you know, this use case, I know with Veriff is very unique. And you're actually helping vulnerable individuals have independence of their lives, and that's why I love what I do as well.
Yeah, that's a really nice reminder, actually. I think I'm certainly guilty of, you know, we think about metrics, we think about numbers, we think about this big picture, but when you hone in on all of that, it's they're individual people, aren't they? Each one of those numbers is a person, and they've got their life to live. And, you know, I think the service you guys provide is obviously making their lives better, and if we can, you know, aid in that, then it's got to be a beneficial thing too. So let's turn the focus then to what's coming next, to the future. I think, you know, I don't know who wants to take this question. It's what's in the sort of the roadmap for the next 12 months or beyond, and how are you going to look at sort of continually improving this sort of user experience?
I think in an ideal world, we would have an even more seamless solution that could be rolled out more frequently by pension funds. If you look at this biometric technology is mainly catering for the international pensioner population, so members residing overseas. If you look at UK-based pensioners, they're subject to monthly mortality screening, for example. So every month they're screened for mortality check-in status before they receive their pension benefit. So I think in an ideal world, from our perspective and a pension fund perspective, this kind of technology would be, as I say, rolled out more efficiently and be less of a sort of reactive process and consciously asking the pensioner to go through the process. Maybe it's something that we could do that was more seamless and maybe sort of sat in the background of day-to-day activities. So it could be using biometric facial authentication when the pensioner's accessing a secure online platform, for example, as opposed to password protection. Bonnie, I don't know if you'd like to elaborate on that.
Yeah, I think you're definitely on the right lines there, Chris. I think Veriff's whole kind of culture, mission is to remove passwords and to just have a biometric footprint that kind of goes with you throughout your life. And maybe even if we're looking way in the future for Veriff, it would be, why not a biometric as your passport? Why even have a passport? You know, that's way into the future. But what we're looking at, and what I'd love to see within Crown Agents Bank is to embrace the use case that we have trialled to great success within the pensions product. So things like our client onboarding. Why not? Why not use the biometric facial authentication to onboard clients within the bank, employees? There's so many different use cases for it. What I really like that Veriff have started to introduce as well, and this is something that I am working with the team to try to gauge client interest, is although the biometrics are great, what we want to try to do is create almost mortality screening like we have here in the UK, but tapping into the books and records of other countries. So India, for example, I believe Veriff are starting to launch that facility in India. That would be really interesting for us, because that would give even more assurance, because you're actually looking at the books and records of the country. We do have a global product, so we have to be careful that we're sitting within the regulatory landscape that we have to operate in. However, there are so many different use cases for the biometrics that I think wider as a bank, we should seriously consider, maybe not on the 2024 roadmap, but going into the future. What I also am looking at is passive proof of life, maybe. So, as Chris mentioned, not physically asking a member to complete a declaration, but doing it more passively in the background. So there's lots of opportunity for the future, and we have a market leading product at the moment, but in a year's time we might not have, because technology just moves. So we have to keep looking at the competitor landscape and making sure that we stay that one step ahead.
Agreed. I think that's really important. We need to make sure that we continue to innovate in the pension space. But to Bonnie's point, we've used this technology to great effect in the pension space within Crown Agents Bank. There are definitely other use cases within the organisation where we could apply this technology effectively. Bonnie cited the onboarding scenario, for example. We could be using biometrics for KYC, know your customer, and numerous other things across the organisation. And I think, the use case in pensions could serve as a great blueprint for that. Ultimately, what we're trying to achieve in the future is we serve both the pension funds and indeed their underlying pensioners. What we're trying to achieve is providing the pension funds with the highest level of verification that we possibly can for the pensioners that they're paying benefits to. And then from a pensioner perspective, we want to provide the pensioner with the most seamless experience that makes it super easy for them to complete their proof of life without any hassle.
Love it. I really like that focus on both ends of the problem there as well. It really is a good way of approaching it, and I think very exciting times ahead by the sounds of things as well in terms of the development. And you're right to point out that this stuff moves quickly. You always have to be on the front foot with it, don't you? Because as soon as you find an advantage there, a competitive advantage, someone else is onto it too, and you have to keep sort of pushing the needle. Just want to say, move slightly away from the tech angle to a certain extent, because I think that we've talked a lot about it today for obvious reasons, but it doesn't exist sort of in a vacuum, and there is a bigger sort of education piece that goes around this. I think you guys do some very exciting stuff around educating users and making sure that they're familiar with the system that they're using and everything else. Do you guys want to just talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's a really holistic way of approaching this problem, I think.
Yeah, of course. I mean, as I say, we've tried to make this as inclusive and easy to use as possible at every step of the way. So if you think about from the initial communication that we send out to the pensioners, we make it explicitly clear what's required from the pensioners to complete the process successfully. We've actually just finalised revamping the comms that we send out, and we've based that on both pension fund and direct member feedback. So we're constantly improving everything from the communication to the user experience. So everything from the letters that we send out. As I say, we have a user guide that we enclose in the letters that we send out or attach to the emails that we send to the pensioners. Again, that helps them logging into the platform and to actually use the biometric process. There's an explainer video that sits within the portal as well, and again, it guides the pensioner through what's expected. It tells them to make sure they obviously have a camera-enabled device and they're connected to the internet, that they have their photo ID at the ready. So we accept numerous types of ID. I think the latest statistic is 12,500 types plus globally that we accept as a partnership. So national ID cards, driving licenses, passports, etc. So the explainer video will sort of walk them through exactly what's required for them. Once they commence the proof of life process, again, we've referenced this earlier in the conversation, things like assisted image capture help the pensioner complete the process successfully. But in addition to that, as I say, we have that dedicated customer service team that are on hand if the pensioner does have any queries. We're doing this to maximize engagement and make sure the user experience is, as I say, as efficient as possible. So as I say, at every step of the way, we've tried to provide that support and guidance.
It's such a great service, and I think that having the tech that works and works efficiently, works quickly is obviously a big part of it. But it is this bigger pie almost, isn't it? That you have to sort of create that complete surround. So that's great. We're just running a bit low on time actually. So let's just finish up by sort of some actionable insights. If you've got a couple of key takeaways from today's conversation, Bonnie, particularly from you around if there is another organisation that's in this situation of looking to improve the UX, what some tips you would give them possibly. So let's start with you possibly around that then, and then we can jump to Chris.
So the tips that I would in the demographic that we're in, we need to keep that UX as clean as possible. So you need to make sure that you're adhering to WCAG guidelines, because we are in a vulnerable user group. You need to ensure that jargon is kept to the minimum. You need to ensure that there is a human at the end of the phone if they need to speak with somebody. We cannot go that one step further and just remove that human from the process, because it's what sets our product apart. And although somebody coming into the journey may not want to invest in that kind of human support, I think it pays dividends.
Yeah.
So it's all about the member journey, keeping the member in the front of your mind the whole way through the product development cycle, ensuring that the UX is clean and as simple as possible. You know, it's not rocket science. That it just needs to be really, really easy to understand. Partner with the right organisations and communicate along the way with your clients and the members, because without them, you are building a product that you think that they might want.
Yeah.
But with that voice of customer, it's really rich data, and we do it all of the time. Whenever we're on with clients, we take the opportunity to ask and record the information. So it's all about, it's digitally led with a human touch, and that's our USP.
I love that. And it is an entirely collaborative process, isn't it? Obviously collaborative between Veriff and you guys, but also your customers as well. He says, you know, you mentioned the customer feedback angle being a big part as well. How about you then, Chris? Is there any sort of takeaways that you'd like to throw in as well?
I completely agree with Bonnie's points. I think simplicity is key. So keeping that user experience as simplistic as possible and user friendly as possible. We're not trying to confuse people and make this an arduous process. So simplicity. I mean, if you look at one of the competitors that are offering similar solutions in the marketplace, they have an app-based solution, and we've had direct feedback from funds that have actually tried that in the past and then have since switched to Crown Agents Bank and Veriff with our solution, because ours is browser-based, URL-based. It removes that hurdle. What we've heard is that pensioners having to first download the app, then log into the app and complete the process, just causes additional hurdles as part of that process. So, it brings me back to my point. Simplicity, making sure the user experience is as user-friendly as possible. And as I mentioned in the introduction, we're regulated by the FCA, and we keep all of their principles front of mind, but specifically in this scenario, treating customers fairly. So we've reviewed that guidance, and again, we've designed everything from the member comms to the user experience and the functionality of the platform with those principles in mind. We've referenced the customer service we have on hand via digital or digital methods or telephone. So there are numerous ways to engage with us or indeed the pension provider directly. And as I say, it's all about making that member experience as simplistic and easy to use as possible.
I like that. That's a good point to finish on, I think. Simplicity being the core of a great UX, right, and a great customer experience. Yeah. So, Chris, Bonnie, thank you for joining us. This has been, I really appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to us here. A very insightful discussion. I think we've learned an awful lot. I'm looking forward. I think I'll say it now. I'd like to talk to you again in a year's time, maybe, and see how this is progressing from there. So, Thank you very, very much.
Pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.